Hello, and welcome to Hard Conversations. This is a podcast about male sexuality, intimacy, and sex positivity, where we unpack the taboo topic of erectile issues in a safe, non-judgmental space. And now, here's your host, sex therapist, Timothy Norton.
Hello, and welcome to Hard Conversations. My next guest, I'm really excited about, Dalychia Saah, using the pronouns she and her, is a sexuality educator, professor, writer, speaker, and the co-founder of Afrosexology, a pleasure-based sex education platform that creates educational content and workshops to center the pleasure, empowerment, and liberation of Black people. Dalychia is also a lecture professor at the Brown School of Social Work at Washington University in St. Louis, where she teaches courses in graduate-level social theory, social justice, and sexuality education. She is also a sought-after facilitator and keynote speaker for conferences and events related to social justice and/or sexuality. Dalychia's work and words have been featured in HuffPost, Teen Vogue, Allure Magazine, Vibe Magazine, Glamour Magazine, Harper's Bazaar, Playboy, Broadly, and others. She has received the Phenomenal Woman Award, Spirit of Social Work Award, Reverend Robert Gilbert Advocacy Award, and Academy for Leadership and Civic Engagement Leadership Award. Thank you so much for joining us today on Hard Conversations, Dalychia.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
So I just read your bio to everybody, and I just wanted to ask, what got you into all of this?
Yeah, it's like one of those things that now I'm able to look back and be like, oh my gosh, it totally makes sense that this is what I'm doing in my life, but fought it the entire path.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up in a family that was pretty, I had traditional conservative values around sex and relationships and dating, a lot of it rooted in religion. But my parents are both scientists. My dad's a doctor and mom's a scientist. And so they taught us to be really inquisitive. They're if we had a question, their response was usually just to send us somewhere to find the answer before they would give us the response. Except for when it came to religion, question about religion and questions about sex. That was no conversation, shut down, do not talk about it. But unfortunately for them, they had already given us all these research skills. So being the nerdy person I was, I just would spend so much time looking up how do you know if someone likes you? How do you hold someone's hand? What do you do? All of from that all the way to looking up how do you give a blowjob? Just all of it, just not really knowing. And so I was always the person in my high school who was let me tell you all the fun facts about sex stuff. And was very inquisitive prior to me even having many sexual experiences. But still, I always really denied it as a career path. Cause this is not a thing that people do. No one really tells you about oh, you can be a doctor, a lawyer, or a sexologist. That does not come up in many family conversations. And so through lots of winding ways, I just finally sat down and was this is the thing that's been drawing at me since elementary school, middle school, high school, college. And I've been I can't do it. It's not a path. It's not a thing. And so when we finally sat down and I was let's just create something, me and my friend Rafaela created Afrosexology. And that the feeling we get when we do that work is so affirming that I was oh, this is the thing I was supposed to be doing. And I reflect back on all the people along the way who were you're supposed to do this. And I'm I can't do this. It's not a job. It's not a thing that makes sense. And I really just struggled because it was something that I was in the Black community with everything we have going on. I do not know if talking about sex is a thing that's going to heal us. So I was really resistant, and honestly, it was just this is something that white people have the time to do. And I would tell my mentors, I don't have the privilege to do this. And it really took me reading Audre Lorde's Uses of the Erotic that really helped me to be okay, a part of our wellness, a part of our healing is also our relationship to our body or to our sexuality, and that there is space for this conversation. And the work we've been able to do with Afrosexology has just affirmed more and more that this is needed. It's important.
And when was that moment? How long ago?
So that was right after grad school. So 5 years ago.
5 years ago. And 5 years ago where you read Audre Lorde and you were okay, now I see this as important work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So before that, denying it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 5 years of Afrosexology where you were also, I don't know, you could almost call it spiritually invested in it and politically saying this is the right work to be doing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It was just a lot of different things. It was like, we're based in St. Louis. So this is where Mike Brown was murdered, and the police brutality and all the riots, and just seeing the way that Black bodies are still constantly in danger, and just like the toll that like all of that was taking on our bodies and on our health. I was like, oh, okay. Masturbation is something that feels good, but it like gives you endorphins that you need to like feel like a high again, and a positive feelings to keep you going when you're going outside and marching against police officers all the time. So it was a lot of things coming together to where I was really seeing that like the work we're talking about is not just theoretic, but it also lives in our body, and our body carries the trauma, and that like reclaiming our body and having agency over our body is like a way to survive, resist, thrive in this like world that we have set up. Yeah.
And when you have Afrosexology workshops and seminars, does it get just as political as it is sexual? Does all that stuff also come up?
It does. It does. I think it's, I think that's something that's really beautiful about so many of the identities that a lot of people hold, especially people who are marginalized in many ways, is that it's really hard to separate how politically our identities have been constructed and used against us from us talking about our liberation and our joy and our pleasure. So it comes up and it gets woven in these really beautiful ways, where at 1 minute we're just having this very intentional, intra-focused conversation around like orgasm and not knowing if I know how to ask for it, feeling like we need to fake orgasms, all this stuff, to like going back to macro and thinking about all the other things that we fake in society to survive as women, as people of color, as whoever in this world. And so it oftentimes really just like balances in a really beautiful way. But we try to create our spaces, Afrosexology in particular, to where we are talking more about pleasure, because there are just so many spaces where we are talking about politics and how to resist all the time. And so we want to create spaces where it could just be like pure joy.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And I heard you. So for the listeners out there, I saw Dalychia speak at a conference, which is a conference of sex education, sex counselors, sex therapists, sex educators, in a room full of hundreds of people. It might have been 1,000 people on there. She killed it. It was just this awesome talk that she gave. And I already knew about Afrosexology, and I was really excited when I found out that you were the speaker. But in your talk, you talked about like this 2-year break that you took that was pleasure-based. And I want to just hear a little bit more about what that was like and what you learned during that time. That has been such a life-altering experience. So what ended up happening was that I had all these internalized shame-based messages around masturbation, that it was something that people who are raised as women don't do. All of these messages that it's not what you do once you're partnered, it's not whatever. And so I had by that time I had worked through a lot of that shame to come to the place where I was masturbating. I was this is my favorite thing ever. I love this. It's great. But it also was really affirming to be that I don't have to wait for a partner or wait for somebody else to make me feel this. I can do this for myself, by myself, with myself. And that understanding really inspired me to think about other aspects of my life. But what happened at the 2-year point was we were really deep into Afrosexology. It was this amazing work that we were doing. I was working a full-time job. So I'm waking up at 4 a.m., working at Afrosexology, going to my 9 a.m. job, coming home, working at Afrosexology. And I was the feeling that I have while doing Afrosexology was such pleasure. It felt so orgasmic. It was I would hop out of bed at 4 a.m. ready to go. And it was becoming, once I had that positive, really pleasurable feeling, it became harder and harder and harder to go to my job. And it wasn't that my job was awful. It just did not compare. I just was I don't feel challenged. I don't feel energized. I don't feel excited. I don't feel the way that I feel when I'm working on Afrosexology. And I just started really questioning, is that okay? Or do I want to take the risk of feeling I can do something that feels better? Right. Mm-hmm. And that led me to quitting my job, which was a really hard decision because everyone was
like from the time I was young, I was told that like working a 9 to 5 is supposed to kind of suck, that like you're supposed to hate your job. That's like a thing in our culture as Americans, that like, you know, we have whole TV shows around people who hate their work life. And so it was like something that I had normalized. And I think like creating Afrosexology was the first time where I really questioned, like, does this have to be my normal? Like, can I have a job that I feel excited to be a part of, that I feel fully seen and I can be my full self and I get to be creative? And so I just started like making moves towards that when it came to like my job and then my friends and then the food that I ate and the clothes that I wear. And I was just like, what does it mean to like actively move towards the thing that bring me pleasure, the things that feel good, instead of just settling for these mediocre experiences? Because I was at a place where I was like, I don't want to settle for mediocre sex. So why do I settle for mediocre work life, mediocre friendships, mediocre like activities, that things that I didn't want to do? And I recognized that a lot of it was my conditioning, that since a really young age, you're like raised to kind of just like settle and just like go for what is given to you, and to not ask for more. Like there were so many times when I was told like my dreams are too big, I'm asking for too much, I'm demanding too much of my country, I'm demanding too much of da-da-da. And like at a certain point I was like, actually, I think that like it's okay to like dream big and to ask for what you want and to move towards that. So that journey has been super transformative for me. And like now I'm like a lecturer at a university and I absolutely love my job. Like I like teach until 8:30 at night and I leave feeling so energized. Like it's like the best feeling in the world. My students are amazing. I love the intellectual discourse we have in the classroom, the work that we're producing. And it's just been so rewarding to like, for me to question, what I would say is like capitalistic, and what I think some feminists would say is paternalistic, is that we are so focused on what are we doing, what are you doing, like what are you producing? And I think this way of life really helped me to think about the process more than the product and the feeling more than the doing. So it's like, how do I feel when I'm doing this job? How do I feel as I'm having this meal? How do I feel as I'm having this conversation? Like, what topics do I want to really start talking? Like I had to tell my friends, like, I don't want to gossip anymore. Like I feel like shit after this. I feel like really like self-conscious. I don't want to keep doing this. Like why keep doing these activities that don't feel good? So that intentionality for those 2 years has gotten me to a place where I feel like I trust myself so much more. I trust my decisions. I trust my no. Like I know how to honor my no, my gut reaction of like, I actually don't want to do this, or I don't want to put up with this. And I've learned to like pursue the things that I really want to say yes to, like traveling more and like honoring more of my dreams, and just say the things that I'm like, that I've told myself that I can't do because I'm too young or I'm whatever. And now I'm just going after it. And it feels really good. It's been a really amazing journey.
And what a wonderful parallel for just pursuing pleasure in the bedroom.
Yeah.
Right? Just prioritizing the things that you want, the people that you want to be with, the way you want to spend that time. And it's almost like a meta version of that. And because maybe a lot of the time, you know, people bring in this directive of, okay, we've got to figure out how to have a spontaneous or simultaneous orgasm through these very 1 or 2 or 3 different ways and within a certain time frame. And without any regard for how are the sheets right now, and am I a little hungry or thirsty, and all of those things. So I bet when you're doing that 24/7, I bet it really shines through when you're talking about work and or you're talking about pleasure and sexuality with students and people taking your courses and seminars.
Yeah. I think the one word that people use to describe me a lot, they're always like, oh my God, you're so passionate. And I'm like, well, I think it's because I've like, in our society, we limit passion to the bedroom instead of like letting it be throughout our entire lives. And so I wish everyone that we came in contact with, we were seeing them and doing the thing that they feel most passionate about, because our interactions with them would be so different. And that would definitely influence our friendships, our relationships, our sexual experiences if we're interacting with people who like feel that passion throughout their entire life, instead of feeling like they have to dim their light everywhere else. And then they have this one space where they're allowed to like light up. So I love it. I also had a student who like had us do this amazing activity one day where she brought in a list of like feeling words. And she was like, how do you want to feel when you're having sex? Like, do you want to feel aggressive today? Do you want to feel naughty? Do you want to feel romance? Do you want to feel like a tease? Like, how do you want to feel? And then to build actions off of that. And I really love that, because I do think so often we're like, well, we're going to do this, this, and this. But the idea of like tapping into the feeling, which can be totally different. Like if I want to feel animalistic, maybe we're going to start off with like play fighting or like wrestling, which is different than if I want to feel romance. Maybe we're going to start off with like some music, you know? And so just thinking about how I want to feel when I'm doing things has like definitely impacted so many aspects of my life.
And are you able to impart that to the students? Like, do you feel like, how do they take this information in?
I think they're pretty receptive. I think a lot of us are realizing that like we don't, like the things that we have been taught are normal don't have to be our normal. And that while that might be like really unnerving to like rip the rug under somebody and be like, everything you thought was true is no longer true. But I think a lot of people who see it as that, like, as an opportunity for them to expand their way of thinking and to select what their truth is going to be and to like explore like that space, that possibility where we did not know possibility existed, feels really energizing. But it can also feel really scary. And I tell my students all the time that like there is sometimes resistance that comes up when people are talking about liberation or these like new possibilities, because they could really feel like someone's just like ripping the rug from under you. So it's a mix of feelings. I would say that like by the end of the semester, my students have like gone along with the ride and they're on board. And not that they're on board by meaning like they believe what I consider to be truth as their truth, but that they're open to this idea of like, we can question, we can critique, we can hold things in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past. And there's beauty with that, and also heavy responsibility about what do you do with that new understanding. And what does that mean for like old ways of being that we have internalized and normalized? And so it's a lot, but that's what I love about my class more than like a workshop, because a workshop I have you for 3 hours and it's a lot to drop that on you. That's a good, okay, bye. But a class, I have them for 15 weeks. And so we're able to go through that journey in a way that you could hold the transitions that people go through.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that's a great place to kind of segue into whatever Hard Conversations is typically about. Yeah. So let's start with normal. Yeah. And you're regularly deconstructing normal. Mm-hmm. And one really typical facet of normalcy is an erect penis in sex, right? Normal sex, usually the narrative will include something regarding an erect penis penetrating. Yeah. So I imagine you've deconstructed that once or twice in some of these classes.
Yeah, I mean it's something that I think about a lot, and it's actually I've been thinking more recently about like about creating new erotic language, and like that can we create words for experiences that are pleasurable, that don't involve penetration, or that are not limited to only penetration. I think we've limited sex to penetration and orgasm, and it could be so many more things. And I think again, when you like become expansive with possibilities, you start questioning like, okay, so me and this person just mutually masturbated. Is that sex if there was no penetration? Or if you and this person have this like really hot makeout session and wrestling around and but clothes are on and never came off, is that not a sexual experience, right? And so I think when we start thinking about the things that the experiences that, when I start thinking about the experiences that are pleasurable to me, it kind of makes me sad that I can't, in our traditional standard, some of those experiences don't count as sex, but some experiences that I'm like, that actually was pretty shitty sex, but that counts as sex, right? And so I love the conversations that people are having about like all the different ways that our bodies can experience pleasure. And I think this conversation is becoming more expansive to include queer sex, people with disabilities, people who don't want to have penetration in sex for so many different reasons, people who like what we consider foreplay and see that as like the main activity. And why is that the thing that we're calling, like, we're just doing this prior to getting to penetration, instead of being like, no, like maybe we just want to have like a sexy massage and like wrestle and roll around on each other and like kiss and lick all over each other. And that doesn't have to include penetration. And so Yeah, and I think the way that we've limited sex to being around penetration hurts a lot of us. It hurts people who cannot get erect or who don't want to have penetration during sex. It hurts people who are having sex that has nothing to do with penises or penetration. So I think this new creation that we're doing around like expanding what sex is and hopefully like creating new language to call it is going to be helpful for a lot of us.
Yeah, the new language is. I always love when language evolves and you start looking at the linguistics, because there's so much power in language and just flippant words. Like you just mentioned foreplay, and I never thought about how oppressive that word can be, because you're like, wait, what do you mean? This is this is before the play. Right. Like this could be the main course. I love this part. Yeah.
And a lot of people with clitoris do love that part. And it's seen as like, just this like really, let's just get this over with so that we can get to the main thing, when it's like, I actually don't need that. I just want more of this. Let's just slow down here. But it's not seen as important or as valid as when penetration happens.
I was talking on the show with Barry McCarthy, and he was talking about one of his favorite things to do was or something that he made every client do, every couple, was the man had to achieve an erection and let it go like 3 times during the course of an encounter. And he said like every single one of them hated it, hated to just like let that release. But the way you're talking about it, what you're talking about right now kind of reminded me of that, of just accepting the play of it, and whatever happens. And there's so many more enjoyable things that are going on.
There's so much. And it really sucks that we downplay so many things that we find pleasurable instead of having it all on the table. I think a beautiful challenge is for people to have sex without penetration, because then you can like explore totally different things. You might not have even known that like that spot behind your ear feels really great, because you just kind of skip over and get to penetration. You might not realize that like you actually don't need penetration to orgasm. You don't need penetration to have a pleasurable experience. So yeah, I think it's great that people are getting challenged to do more things like that, even if it's hard.
Yeah, even if it's challenging.
It's challenging, yeah.
You mentioned a minute ago that people don't want to have penetration for so many reasons. Could you go into a little bit of that as to why people might not want penetration?
Yeah, people might not want penetration because they don't need it to orgasm or to have a good time, so they don't want that. People might not want penetration because they've experienced some type of sexual assault, and that's not the kind of sex that they want to have right now. People might not want to have penetration because they don't feel ready for that. And that's just like not where they're at. Like, I hate that, like, when people say like, oh, I want to have a sexual experience with you, that it just means to somebody that involves penetration, which it might not. Someone might just want to like have oral or just like do something else. So there's a lot of different things. And then some people might have different feelings around things that are penis shaped or around penetration, that like they don't want to do that. Some people might have body dysmorphia, and so they want to engage in sexual experiences without bringing in body, like genitals in a particular way. And then some people might have erectile, what is the word that in your field?
I've been saying I've been saying issues. Okay,
yeah, erectile issues. To where they feel like because they can't, that they're having those issues, that their sex is limited now, instead of like thinking that there's like so many other things that we can be doing. I love talking or getting people to think about. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I just love getting people to think about like their own wheel of pleasure. Like, what are all the things that make you feel good, right? And so on my wheel includes like booty rubs, because I love getting like butt massages, and like I love naked cuddling, and there's like other things like nipple play, and there's things that like feel good, that like all of those things can be explored, instead of saying that like sex has to go in this formula every time.
Yeah. So I'm imagining one of the biggest challenges to this idea is going to be the guy or just the person with a penis who, I don't know, maybe there's some self-righteousness in there, and just is like, forget all that. Like this is crap. Like I gotta go in there. I gotta penetrate. I gotta come. I gotta nut. And that's what sex is. Like,
Yeah.
and I imagine a lot of people resist, thinking of challenging that might be kind of like a difficult conversation to bring up with somebody, and trying to work with a partner who's so like such a bulldozer, or so like narrow-minded, or just traditional.
Yeah. And I would say that, like, if that works for you and the people you're having sex with, then like, go ahead. No one's saying that you have to try whatever, if you find something that's working for you, I guess you could continue doing it. But I think if it's not working for one partner, I think if one partner or whoever, one person in the situation is like, actually, this isn't working, I want to have sexual experiences outside of this, which is really hard because a lot of people who are socialized to be women are not raised to think that sex is for us, like sex is for our presumed hetero male partner. And so this whole conversation of like advocating for like, actually, I don't want that, or that doesn't feel good, or you go in too early and I'm not aroused enough and it kind of hurts and it's dry it up and I'm not in the mood and like all of that stuff. We don't get the space to say that out loud, but if you do have someone who is saying that, I do think it is a part of the responsibility of people who are in the partnership to say like, oh, I actually want an experience that's pleasurable for everyone involved and not just me. But yeah, I don't typically work with people who don't want to work with me. That's the beauty of my work, is like, usually I'm like, you're here because you want to do something different. So, but I think like with consent, like, I don't want to coerce or force anyone into doing something that they don't want to do, because then it's not going to be a pleasurable experience. But I do think that like knowing how our bodies change and knowing how at any moment our ability status could change. If we're lucky, our age will change. And with that comes different body functions, that like learning to experience pleasure and eroticism outside of penetration and orgasm can be really liberating for you for the rest of your life, and not just like what works for you right now, but thinking about holistically about what's going to work for you in 50 years, what's going to happen if something changes, what's going to happen if your partner no longer wants to do this, and like how do you create space that is pleasurable for you all lifetime, and not just like what works right now because this is what feels good. Yeah.
I really like that. So I guess I'm wondering, do males, do people with penises as well take your classes and seminars?
Yeah.
Did you get both?
Yeah, we do. We've actually done one that was particularly for men, which was more so of us being like, we want to know what y'all want to talk about. And we were just really, I actually thought, to be honest, I actually thought the conversation would be a lot more about sex. And it was a lot more about relationships and intimacy. I think it was a lot more like, I don't know how to, like, someone in our workshop said, I don't know how to, what did he say? He was like, I don't know how to penetrate a woman with anything other than my penis. Like, I don't know how to like let my heart be open. I don't know how to just be seen and like to see her and to like make her feel heard. And he's like, I struggle with pillow talk. I struggle with the intimacy. I struggle with breakups. Like, and I don't know where to, and so it was a lot of conversations around that. And then it was like a surprising moment when we like read numbers to them about how many people fake orgasms. Like, they all like were mind blown that people were not enjoying the sex that they were having, or that there was a possibility that someone had sex with them and had faked it. Until that made them more open to like, because I think there was a level of confidence of like, oh, my game is good. Like, I know what I'm doing when it comes to sex. And then some of those numbers, they were like, wait, what do you mean people with vulvas don't need penetration to orgasm? What do you mean people fake orgasms? And so that opened them up way more to having conversations about like, oh, okay, we need to have conversations about what kind of sex people want to have. And then people oftentimes talk about like performance anxiety and like the pressure, especially as Black men who have been hypersexualized in our culture, this like idea that like, I always have to perform. I always have to like be ready to go at all times. Then I can't say no. And that I can't say, actually, I just want to chill tonight, or I want to cuddle, or I want a booty rub. Like, you know, like not being able to say those things and feeling like they have to always have penetrative sex.
What would you say to them?
I think, acknowledging how sexualized the culture is, particularly around Blackness and particularly around Black men. And that they are oftentimes seeing these stereotypes as like you have the bigger penis and that you're like the sexual prowess. And so giving space for that, but then also like affirming as much as everyone else that like consent goes both ways, goes all the ways. And like you have the right to say no, you have the right to say, I don't want to do this. You don't have to feel, and that like if somebody is shaming you for it, that's probably not somebody you want to be hanging out with anyways. And a lot of times like people will like, even women will shame men for like not wanting to have sex with them right there, right now. So I think creating a conversation for people to see that like your experience is common, which I think a lot of ways that shame manifests is like feeling like you're the only one. So creating space for people to say like, oh my gosh, I also feel that too. And then affirming that you don't have to continue going down that path because everyone else has treats you like you're supposed to.
That must be a really nice thing to hear.
I hope so.
Yeah. Like taking away that pressure. Yeah. And it's the kind of message that people probably need to hear dozens and dozens of times.
Yeah.
But yeah, that permission to, isn't it all about permission at the end of the day? I feel like so much of this work is just permission giving.
I agree. I agree. I was like telling someone, I was like, I feel like I have like the easiest job because I don't actually have to like, especially as someone who's not a therapist, I don't actually have to like tell somebody. Like, I feel like with calculus, the only way to teach someone is like giving them step-by-step instruction and like, this is the right way to do this. But when it comes to people's sexual journey, so many times, like people already know what they want to do. And it's just about giving them permission. So I feel like I'm just like lighting flames and then watching it run free. Like, but I'm not. So it feels like a really easy job to just be like, yeah, you can fantasize about that. Yeah, you can try that. Yeah, you should do that. Yes, like you're not weird for thinking that. And then seeing people like that one permission gives them permission to explore so many other things that they've been denying themselves or shaming themselves about. So it's beautiful work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really nice. And so now I'm picturing the seminar and you're having Black men giving them permission to not have to have sex, to not have to have an erect penis when you're naked with a person, to not have to perform, quote unquote, perform, whatever that even means.
Yeah.
And what a nice normalizing message to hear. But then on the other end, like kind of schooling their partners on how to not shame them for not going along and doing the thing that everybody in porn or the media is telling them that should be happening in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And then that's an important message too.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been doing like, so I do this one talk called The Oppressor Within, talking about the ways that we've like normalized a lot of different forms of oppression and having this practice, particularly with a lot of my students around the ways that we have been hurt by a system and the ways that we've helped the system. So the ways that we've been hurt by patriarchy and naming those, because we don't get to name that a lot of time in the system, and then ways that we have perpetuated patriarchy because it's normalized, it's something that's been around us, and it oftentimes happens without us even knowing it. And so becoming more aware of the ways that we've been hurt by something and giving it space and holding space for it, whether that's like losing our relationship with our father once we hit 13 because I couldn't sit on his lap anymore, or being catcalled when I walked down the street, or being sexually assaulted, or feeling like I can't walk at home by myself at night, all the different ways that we have to like survive within the system, but then also the ways that we perpetuate it, whether that's like judging other women and slut shaming other women, or shaming men for having small penis, or people with penises for having small penises, or being transphobic or being homophobic and telling a person who doesn't want to have sex with us that they're queer, like all of these other things that we have normalized in our culture that we also end up sometimes doing, and taking ownership for that so that we can become more aware of the ways that we're perpetuating the things that we say we're hurt by and that we want to see gone. So yeah, it's a lot of deep introspective work, but I think it's the work that's needed and us to move towards a more liberatory society and like healthier relationships in general.
So I love all of those points, and I kind of want for the audience to just let's spell one of those out. So this is, again, under the topic of the oppressor within. So how What's so bad about penis shaming or penis size shaming? Like how is that perpetuating oppression?
Yeah. So for me, I think that like all body shame is perpetuating sizeism and like the ways that we feel like other bodies are not seen as fully human or as like healthy or as worthy as other bodies. Whether we're shaming someone's body because the color of their skin, like you're not as worthy because you're not white, or their gender, you're not as worthy because you're not cis or whatever. I think like, or because they're fat, or like you're not as worthy because you're a fat body. So all of that is the same. And so if we're going to talk about getting rid of the shaming of bodies, we're talking about all bodies, which also means critiquing the systems that are told us that like male bodies are supposed to have giant penises, which ends up being shaming towards a lot of people who don't have giant penises, and also ends up being like pretty transphobic to people who don't have, like, we're not given a penis at birth, right? So there's just, for me, it's like I can't see the value of like saying, well, we're going to take down this in this one form, but it's okay over here because these people have these identities. And I think we have to do better at that, because for me, liberation does not look like taking my oppressor's place. And so it's not me getting to the position of power where I can say, well, now I can shame men and white people all day, because it's like that is fundamentally against a value that I have, which is like, I believe that you cannot dehumanize other people without dehumanizing yourself. And so the moment that I am seeing somebody as less worthy to me, that is dehumanization. I am also dehumanizing myself. And there's no way for me in my practice to truly be at peace and love with my body at the same time of shaming somebody else's body. It feels like a very connected practice.
Absolutely. And so then from a practical standpoint of just language, you know, a person is going to see this small penis or this flaccid penis and have these norms in their head from all the porn that they've seen, and they're going to see a discrepancy, and they're going to have this reaction, and they don't know what to say. Maybe it's that moment of nervousness or some other kind of force that's acting in the bedroom in that moment. So what can they say?
That is a really good question. I feel like I don't think I would necessarily react to the penis. I think it would be a conversation of like, what do we want to do tonight or right now? As far as, because it could be that like penis and penetration is now on the table for what we're doing. And so we need to have a larger conversation about like, what turns you on? What turns me on? What do you want to do? Like, what are you into? What are you not into? What are your boundaries? Like that, which is a conversation that I don't think a lot of us have when we're having sexual experiences. And so it's hard for me to, I don't know. That's a really great question. I don't think I would react to the penis by making a comment on it.
Right. Maybe
I
not.
wouldn't want someone to make a comment about my breast.
Right. Well, maybe not even what they'd say out loud, but maybe what they'd kind of have to say to themselves, like in a coaching way, or just in a normalizing way, or like, what did I learn in class that semester? Like this is one of those situations where I'm trying not to perpetuate any shameful situations. What did Dr. Saah teach me about body positivity in this moment?
Yeah. I think in my head I would just affirm like, what a beautiful person. And then keep it going. I think like staying focused on the reasons that you're like into this person, the reason that you're here, and not looking for deficits, which I think we're really good at looking for, or what we consider deficits in our culture.
Focus on the reasons that you're here. And those might not come up, right?
Yeah.
You might, and then that's just a bigger message of,
what
the heck are you doing here at all?
Yeah. Right.
Right. And just kind of reframing that moment as like, we're two people in this room or wherever we are, in this car, in this park.
Yeah. I think like for me, those moments of connection are so much more powerful than like looking for, because the moment that, for me, the moment that I'm scanning somebody looking for something wrong, in air quotes, I also have to believe that they're scanning me looking for something wrong, in air quotes. And that takes me out of this moment of connection, because there's enough things for me to be self-conscious about my body. You know, like all of us have been giving all these things that we're supposed to be self-conscious about. So the moment that I go, let my headspace go there on someone else's body, it becomes my inner dialogue around me. I'm like, oh, I wonder what they're thinking about me. And then I'm just like, suck it in and position over here, turn the lights off. And then it just is like, it goes into this very chaotic space. And so my practice of like, oh, what a beautiful person, or like, oh, like I'm excited about this, is also a practice for me to be like, oh, I'm a beautiful person and I'm excited to be here.
I'm thinking about an analogy to some of the other ways that you've pursued pleasure, or that people pursue pleasure in the last couple of years. And I guess if you've, because people, like, let's say you're going to eat like your favorite meal ever. And some people will still have those doubts, like, oh, this is going to show up in my stomach or whatever. Yeah. But once you've kind of made the decision, it's time to enjoy.
It's time to enjoy. Yeah.
Right. And then the last thing you want to be doing is, I don't know, analyzing your fork, or, you know, what you're going to feel in the morning. You just want to enjoy the cake or the steak or whatever the heck it is. Like, you want to enjoy the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your moment and your time. And
which is hard. I mean, it's hard. Like, getting out of our head into our bodies is not something we do well in this culture. It's not. And so it is very hard to not have all those thoughts, judging, that self-judging voice going through your head that's telling you, oh my gosh, if you eat this, you're going to regret it. And as you're sitting there taking every bite, before you know, the dish is over and you don't even remember taking a moment to just enjoy it. And I think we go through a lot of activities like that, where we are just like in our heads critiquing and judging ourselves and other people. And not just like you said, once you make the decision, like accepting it and enjoying what you're there to do.
And we are two experts giving listeners permission to do that.
Yes.
Coming from different parts of the country, and we're just saying, hey, like, it's okay. And the research backs it up. When you get out of your head, you're going to like your time in the bedroom more. And it's okay. And some people are actually able to do it, and they have wonderful things to say about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think, like, if that voice is like, I don't know, for me, it's like I've learned to distinguish between my different inner voices. Like, the voice of me that is like, I don't want to do this and I'm forcing myself to do this, which there's so many times when I'm just like, I don't want to be on this panel, but I've been asked to be on this panel. Like, just all these like different things. I don't want to eat this meal, but it's already in front of me. I don't want to finish this book, but I've already started it. I actually don't want to be at this event right now with colleagues. But there's so many times where I've like ignored that voice. So it's like, I've had to learn how to say, like, this is that one voice that like doesn't want to do this thing, and I need to honor that voice and like not do the thing. Then this is the voice that wants to do the thing, but it's scared to do the thing. And so there's like fear there. And like, I've learned to push through my fear towards the things that I want to do. Then there's a voice that's like, oh my gosh, I really do want to do this. And I'm learning to actively move towards that. But like, so I would say don't push through a voice that is telling you this is something that you do not want to do, and like to not go along with that. Cause we've been taught to like go along with so many things that we don't want to do. But to like just like understand the voice, that for me, the hardest thing has been understanding the voice that like is a voice of like I guess a positive fear. Like the voice that's like trying to protect me, but like from this, I don't know how to distinguish it. It's something that I want to do, but it's like self-doubt that comes up because it doesn't want me to, like with my writing, there's like a lot of voices that's like, oh, you're not a good enough writer, you're not a good enough. And I know writing something I want to do. So I have to learn to like hear that voice and be like, I hear you. I'm safe. I'm loved. I could do this. I could take this like risk and trust on myself, which is totally different than the voice in me that's like, you don't want to do this. There's nothing in you that wants to do this.
Right. It's almost like you have to ground it in a value, or like a specific goal. Like, I like this person. I have been attracted to this person before. We had a good time.
Yeah.
I can sit and enjoy this state. If you don't have that stuff, like I'm not
Yeah.
sure I like this person.
Yeah.
He or she made some weird comments earlier,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
okay, then yeah, your body seems to have heard it, and maybe it's time to listen to the part of your brain that's saying, yeah, we're not really into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am neurotypical. And so I don't know what that looks like for people whose bodies and brains are not telling them something that they can trust. Right. So that those distinguishing between those three voices have been like very much helpful for me. But I do want to say that I don't know if it's like typical for every body and brain.
Yeah. No, definitely not. So some of the things that you mention regarding, all the different reasons that we might hear one of these voices inside the bedroom, some of them are very political.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it comes up in your work that there is like micro level political activism to be done in the bedroom.
I think it does come up. I think the beautiful place where it's been coming up is around pegging. Like,
okay.
For everyone who doesn't know, I mean, pegging is when particularly somebody with a vulva, puts on a strap on and then like penetrates somebody with a penis. That there has been like a lot of work and research around like people with penises enjoying prostate pleasure and like how that has like toppled a lot of the things that they thought would make somebody like that was like emasculating. And like the people who have become more comfortable with pegging and like also have like seen their gender challenged in a really beautiful way and like this comfort in their own definition of masculinity. Because I do think that like a part of so many structures that are oppressive is they define themselves by what is not. And so to be man is to not be feminine. To be man is to not be weak. To be man is to whatever. And so when people are like, oh my gosh, I've spent my whole life thinking that my masculinity also meant that I had to be homophobic. And that means that I have to avoid all of these particular sex acts. And that I'm able to enjoy these sex acts and also understand my gender and my orientation and all this stuff in this very different way. I've seen some people do work there. Then there's also people who are just talking about like the way that we typically have sex with like people with vulvas on the bottom and people with penises on top mirrors like patriarchy and sexism in our society. And so something as simple as like a person with a vulva on top can also challenge power dynamics. And then I think people in the kink world have also been talking about power dynamics in ways that you could hold power in a way that is also really loving for the people that you have power over, which is not what we typically see in like an oppressive hierarchy where like the people with power are usually like exploiting and abusing the people that they have power over. And then I think kink gives us this really beautiful example of like what it means to hold power with so much love and care for your people. So yeah, so those are some of the things that I think come up pretty often.
Yeah, those are great examples. Pegging. So it's good feminism to go out there and peg and teach someone not only a way to, I don't know, stretch their ideas about their own gender, but also a really new level of vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is what comes up for so many people with penises who do it, is that like they didn't know what it meant to be like a receptive, to like receive, to like have the level of vulnerability that it requires to like give someone this much care over, like to open up this much to this. And they're talking physically and then also emotionally, right? Like there's a level of care and trust, and it is extremely, extremely vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable practice. And I think as people are getting more comfortable with it, they're also seeing that like it challenges them. And I've also heard like people say like, I didn't understand the importance of lube until that, things is like, right. I just didn't understand that it could be painful, that like they have become way much more caring penetrators after being penetrated and like knowing what it means to like be aroused and the vulnerability that it takes for someone to like allow to open themselves up to you. So yeah, I definitely think it's a practice that I think a lot of people are learning a lot, things that challenge them sexually, but also like just like things that they normalize as part of their masculinity.
Yeah. And the way you're talking about love, and kink, where, you know, I assume you meant someone being loving while tying them up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you'd want a person who's getting penetrated by a strap on would want the penetrator to show some love in that moment, and some consideration, and is there enough lube there, and all of those things.
Yeah, which are not things that I think people who are raised to be men are taught as a part of masculinity, to like hold that power and that responsibility in a way that is caring and intentional. And that comes with a lot of communication, and a lot of check-ins, and a lot of just like vulnerability.
Yeah. It would be something like I'm imagining like the sex education utopia, if at, you know, when you start having sex, you're 18 or whatever, if someone took you aside and said, okay, you're going to get penetrated now to see what it's like,
right.
to know, hey, everything better be ready. You better be lubricated. You better, you know, be into this person, and listen, you know, what if I don't listen when you start to say, hey, we're not ready.
Right.
Hey, like this is, it's not there yet.
Right.
And all the different combinations of conversations that come up in that, or should come up in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if a lot more people with penises had experienced penetration, the way that they penetrate would be so different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not that I'm like advocating for us to like all anally penetrate people, but I'm just, that level of like consideration that is required. I don't know. I would like to think that it would change the way that people currently penetrate.
Absolutely. So we've almost covered a full hour here. I kind of wanted to get a sense for the future of Afrosexology, or just Dalychia in general, or what you have in the works.
Yeah, so the future of Afrosexology, I mean, we're constantly growing. We're in the works of writing a book, and so we are trying to slow down on our workshops so we can give more time to that. We have a video series. We recorded like 10 Black people sharing their sexual journeys. It was the most beautiful thing ever. And we have a video series. We've like edited them, and we need to put them out. And so we're just waiting for the right time to do that. We're constantly moving around for workshops. So we're going to be in Atlanta for Sex Down South. We're going to be in Cuba for the Association of Black Sexologists and Clinicians. And then we always have like some private things at like universities. And then for me, I'm just good. Like people, like, I remember after the talk, people were like, oh my God, what's next? What's next? I'm like, I feel pretty good. Like, I feel pretty good. Like, I'm just going to sit in this feeling right now. I mean, I'm moving fully into my university. And so I really want to dedicate more time to thinking about my practice as a professor. And I'm thinking more about my practice as a writer, because I spend a lot of time in my head, and I want to figure out how to like display this and share this in a way that makes people not only think but feel. As I'm still working to find my right language outside of academia, which is very think heavy and not feel heavy. So I'm doing that, and I'm also just trying to like hold like my own work right now. Is like, how do I quit my job, right, to do this 2-year thing of like learning about my own pleasure, and now I'm moving more fully into my university. And it's like something that I love doing, but I'm also like, how do I maintain what I've discovered about myself in this journey in the middle point? So like, I remember after the first day of like new faculty orientation, I like came home and I had to like write down my definition of success, because I was like, I'm not going to get brought into the system of like what they define as success. And like, so trying to be really intentional with what it means to be back in academia fully. And then constantly working to make sure that our work is way more inclusive. Like, we have to do way more work to make sure that we're trans affirming, that we're thinking about ability status, that we're thinking about size, that we're thinking about queerness. I just think we can always improve. And so just like being more intentional, thinking about class way more, and like how that intersects with sex in our work.
And did you come up, when you said your own personal definition of success, could you give us a little highlight of what it
I mean, it wasn't profound and beautiful, but,
okay.
but it was like me jotting down, like if I look over my life in the next 10 years, like what are the things that I want to say I've accomplished or that I've done. And so writing that down, and I was able to like look at most of them, and I was just like, okay, I'm on the right track. Like I'm doing what I need to do. And it's just, I had to do that because my university is a research-based school. And so they care about the $1 million grants that you're getting and all of that stuff. And that's how they define success. And I'm not interested in researching Black people in HIV. And so I don't go after a lot of those $1 million grants. And that's like not even my work really. And so I just have to be clear on what's important to me. And that's just it. It's like, what are my values? What aligns with my values, and not getting caught up with trying to seek external validation for something that I internally can validate myself for, which has been so much of my work these past 2 years. It's like learning to trust myself, learning to validate myself, learning to support myself, and not seeking that externally. And I don't want going back into this environment to put me back in a space of feeling like I need to perform in a way that's different from my genuine self in order to seek external validation. So I just said, like, I have to stay on my track. On my track. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, it sounds like that's really been working for you anyways. So I hope it's easy to listen to that. I usually like to ask guests like any final words for listeners. And I'm thinking, I don't really know the demographics of the people who listen to my show. I don't get very good analytic data, but I'm wondering, like, if it is like people that look like me and are male and white, like, and this is going to be a different kind of episode for them.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, if there are some things that you might like to speak to that audience who thought they were going to come here today and get some tips on how to stay hard in the bedroom and, and are getting like some different perspective on things. Like if you had any like final words of wisdom for them.
Oh, I don't know if it's words of wisdom, but words of reality. I think that like if this is like, mostly white men listening to this, I think that the way that we have talked about oppression is that we have limited it to only thinking about how it harms the people that are oppressed and not also thinking about how it harms the oppressor. And so now we're getting words like white fragility, where we understand like this is something that comes from like a construct related to white privilege, and we're understanding toxic masculinity, which comes from patriarchy. And I think like as we're getting this language, we're also seeing the way that these systems of oppression we have set up also harm the people who set them up. And so I think like when we're having these conversations that are asking people to expand or to think about things that they have normalized and kind of bought into, it can feel very hard to like ask someone to stretch in that way. But to all in all understanding that like what people are asking you to do is to understand that by liberating others, you're liberating yourself. By like us removing the definition of like sex to being centered on penis and penetration, you're creating the space for everyone to have an expansive amount of sex, right? That includes all kinds of different things. And that, again, can be scary, but at the end of the day, it will be so better for so many of us, because then we won't have to sit here and be fighting and feeling so much shame and like negativity when we no longer fit inside of the box that was constructed for us. Because if we can all just like live outside these boxes, then so many things that we think of issues are not issues. Because we didn't center our identity on these things to begin with. So I hope that makes sense to people who are not in these conversations every day.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Does it like? I think that first point of it hurts the oppressor too.
Yeah.
Like in a lot of different ways, they setting up these rules. Like, could you give like a couple of examples of just like how it might?
Yes. No, this is great. I rarely talk directly to white men. So I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I think, just like as we're talking about toxic masculinity and we're talking about like how, like even the workshop that I did with mostly men, I was able to see that people are struggling with vulnerability, like what they're struggling with when they're talking about, they're struggling with breakups, they're struggling with like the pillow talk, the intimacy. People are struggling with intimacy and vulnerability. And that's because we've made so much around masculinity around not being vulnerable, right? And around being strong and about swallowing and stuffing down these feelings. And so something that I tell people, like women who are like, they want their partner to be more vulnerable. I'm just like, well, that also means creating space for him to cry, right? Like if you're partnered with a man, like you can't say you don't want somebody to cry because that's weak, but then you also want them to like sit up there and share with you around their personal issues. And so I think the way that we've constructed masculinity, it's created a lot of people who are not in tune and know how to communicate their emotions, and are not as comfortable with vulnerability. That being said, that like I think we're in a space where a lot of people are now questioning and deconstructing masculinity and like saying like, actually, I do want like to talk to somebody about like mental health issues. I do want to talk to somebody around relationship stuff and intimacy and sex. And so I think we're creating space for that. But I think what we saw with how uncomfortable that people raised as men were with emotion and vulnerability is a byproduct of the patriarchal system that we set up to be oppressive in that way.
And it's lonely.
Yeah.
Not being able to be vulnerable and
Yeah.
to say things and have pillow talk and all of those things and cry or whatever. Like while you feel like you're doing what Brad Pitt did in the movie, you still it's a pretty isolated place. So by kind of changing, deconstructing the patriarchy, by breaking it down, by making new rules, you get to not be the highest rate of suicide group and the one with the least number of friends and people that you rely on and highest levels of heart disease and all of that. You can connect. Right.
And just for me to like, my area, like we all have areas of privilege. And so even me, like, I know that I learned so much about my gender from queer theory. Like when people were able, like as people have deconstructed gender norms, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to wear heels everywhere. I actually hate wearing heels. And like, that doesn't make me any less of a woman. And so, which sounds so trivial, but there's just ways that like I was boxed and limited into what I was raised to think of as femininity. And the people who are outside of the box who were redefining gender and gender expression have created space for me to say that like, oh, I also don't have to fit inside this box that I thought I had to. And so I do think that like, as we liberate people or we create societies that are liberated for all of us, we're creating space for like us to expand and to be fully human in ways that we've had to cut off to like go along with what these oppressive norms are.
Really well said. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So this has been a great talk. If people need more than an hour and they just want more Dalychia, where can they find you on the internet and in the world?
Yeah, so dalychiasaah.com is my website. I'm sure you'll have that spelled somewhere because it's not easy to spell. And then Afrosexology, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, our website, and we have lots of really great content on there.
Okay, awesome. And they can go into classes at the University of Washington in St. Louis?
Yeah, so Brown School of Social Work at the University of Washington in St. Louis.
All right, fellow social worker, All right, well, thank you so much, and I'll see you hopefully. Maybe I want to go to Sex Down South. I hope to run into you at a conference soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a good conversation.
Thanks to the show's executive producer, Robin Morrison. Thanks to Kat Murphy, director of social media. Thanks to Team Scrub for the music. Thanks to the sound engineer, Ravi Carmen. Thanks to Brian Hui for naming the show. Thanks to Alex Pitts for the intro. Thanks to Arlene Asuncion for the logo. You can find this podcast at hardconversationspodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. You can locate me on Twitter at TimNortonLCSW. or on my website for my private practice, timnortontherapy.com. You can also email us at hardconversationspodcast@gmail.com or call into our hotline at 662-626-4276. That's 662-MAN-HARD. Thanks to all my friends and family for brainstorming this show with me. Shout outs to the sex positive community, including sex educators, sex therapists, sex coaches, other fellow sex podcasters, sex surrogates, academics, the sexual health medical community, sex workers, the tantric community, and everybody else involved with having hard conversations. Bye-bye.